Hello, viewers. Before we begin, we want to let you know that this is a fictional story created for entertainment purposes. Any resemblance to real people, events, or places is purely coincidental. We are human storytellers sharing these takes to entertain, inspire, and touch hearts. Viewer discretion is advised.
The ballroom glowed with a kind of brilliance that only the wealthiest circles could afford, every detail curated to perfection. Crystal chandeliers cascaded from the ceiling like frozen waterfalls, scattering light across polished marble floors. A live orchestra played a soft, elegant melody that drifted through the air, wrapping itself around the laughter and low conversations of the elite. Women in shimmering designer gowns glided gracefully between tables, while men in impeccably tailored tuxedos exchanged firm handshakes and quiet deals. It was more than a charity gala. It was a stage where power, beauty, and influence intertwined seamlessly. At the center of it all, he appeared exactly as expected, confident, composed, and impossible to ignore. His presence commanded attention without effort, his name carrying weight in every conversation it touched. People greeted him with admiration, some with ambition, others with barely concealed envy. But it wasn't just him drawing eyes tonight. By his side stood a woman who seemed to belong to this world as naturally as the glittering lights above. She was striking, her gown bold and unforgettable, hugging her form in a way that ensured every glance lingered a moment too long. She smiled with practiced ease, her confidence radiating as she leaned slightly into him, as though she had always been there. Whispers followed them wherever they moved. Guests exchanged knowing looks, quietly labeling them the perfect pair. Some assumed she was his wife, others didn't bother to question it at all. Their chemistry felt effortless, almost rehearsed, and undeniably captivating. Then, almost casually, a voice broke through the admiration, asking where his wife was tonight. For a fraction of a second, something flickered across his face before he dismissed it with a smooth, rehearsed excuse. She wasn't feeling well, he said, or perhaps she was out of town. The woman beside him didn't falter. Instead, a subtle smirk curved her lips as she soaked in the attention, as if the answer only confirmed what she already believed. In her mind, she had stepped into a role that was no longer contested. And yet, beneath the polished laughter and sparkling illusion, something felt slightly out of place, like a perfect painting with a crack just beginning to show. As the evening deepened, the energy of the ballroom seemed to shift in her favor. Conversations gravitated toward her, laughter lingered a little longer when she spoke, and eyes followed her as she moved with effortless grace through the crowd. She adapted seamlessly to every interaction, charming influential guests with just the right balance of warmth and sophistication. Her smile was perfectly timed, her words carefully chosen, and her laughter light enough to feel genuine yet polished enough to impress. Standing beside him, she no longer felt like a guest. She felt like she belonged at the very center of it all. With every admiring glance and approving nod, her confidence grew stronger. It wasn't just about the present moment anymore. Her mind began to drift toward the future she was certain was within reach. She could already picture herself stepping fully into this world, not as someone temporary, but as his official partner. The thought of commanding respect in these elite circles, of being recognized and admired, of holding both influence and status, wrapped around her like a promise waiting to be fulfilled.
He only fueled those thoughts.
The way he looked at her, the ease with which he praised her beauty in front of others, the subtle pride in his voice when he introduced her, it all felt intentional. He didn't call her his wife, but he didn't correct anyone who assumed it either. Instead, he referred to her as someone very special, letting the words hang just long enough to invite interpretation. In quieter moments, his tone shifted, hinting that his marriage was little more than a formality, something already fading into the past. Yet not everyone in the room was convinced. A few guests exchanged brief, knowing glances, their expressions tightening with unspoken understanding. They recognized what was happening but chose silence, unwilling to disturb the delicate balance of appearances. Then, almost imperceptibly, the atmosphere began to change. A staff member leaned in to whisper urgently to another, their movements quick and uneasy. Across the room, the event organizers' composed demeanor slipped for just a second, tension flickering across their face. It was subtle, easy to miss, but it spread quietly, like a ripple moving through still water. Something was shifting, and whatever it was, it carried the unmistakable sense that the illusion so carefully built throughout the night was about to be broken. Long before the music filled the ballroom and the chandeliers cast their glow over carefully curated smiles, she already knew. She had known for longer than anyone would have expected, long enough for the initial shock to settle into something quieter, something far more controlled. She was not the fragile, oblivious wife people assumed her to be. Beneath her calm exterior was a mind that observed, calculated, and understood far more than she ever revealed. She carried herself with quiet authority, the kind that didn't demand attention but commanded it all the same. The truth had not come to her gently. It arrived sharp and unforgiving, unraveling her world in a single moment that left no room for denial. The betrayal cut deeply at first, leaving behind a hollow ache that lingered in the silence of empty rooms and unanswered questions. But she did not let that pain consume her. Instead, she allowed it to settle, to transform into something steadier. She watched. She listened. She paid attention to the details others overlooked, the late nights, the subtle changes in behavior, the inconsistencies that told their own story. Rather than confronting him in a moment of anger, she chose patience. Every message, every unexplained absence, every careless mistake became a piece of a larger picture she was quietly assembling. She understood that timing mattered, that truth revealed too soon could be dismissed, twisted, or ignored. So she waited, gathering not just evidence, but clarity. What he failed to recognize, what he never even considered, was that she was not standing alone. Her influence ran deeper than he realized, woven through connections he had taken for granted and foundations he believed he controlled. There were decisions made in her name, assets tied to her authority, alliances that shifted subtly in her favor. While he moved carelessly, confident in his illusion of control, she was already steps ahead. The moment she received confirmation about the gala, about who he would arrive with and how openly he intended to present her, something inside her settled completely. There was no hesitation, no breakdown, no desperate confrontation. Instead, there was clarity. If he was willing to display the truth so boldly, then she would meet it head-on, but on her terms. She prepared with precision. The dress she chose was not just elegant, but commanding, designed to draw attention without needing to demand it. Every detail, from the way she styled her hair to the calm expression she practiced in the mirror, reflected a transformation already complete. The hurt was still there, but it no longer defined her. It had been replaced by something far stronger, control. Her entrance was not an afterthought. It was deliberate, carefully timed, and purposeful. This was not about creating a scene for the sake of drama. It was about revealing what had been hidden, about reclaiming a narrative that had been quietly rewritten without her consent. And as she stepped forward into the night that would change everything, one truth remained steady in her mind. Tonight, she wouldn't be ignored. The laughter and applause of the gala seemed to falter as the grand doors at the far end of the ballroom slowly swung open. For a brief, suspended moment, the chatter of the crowd dimmed, the music hesitated, and every eye instinctively turned toward the new presence entering the room. Time seemed to stretch unnaturally, each second amplifying the impact of what was about to unfold. And then there she was. She walked with a poise that demanded notice, every step measured, deliberate, and yet effortless. The shimmer of her gown caught the soft light, reflecting it back into the room with a quiet brilliance that drew glances like magnets. Her posture was impeccable, her gaze steady and unwavering, as if she had stepped not into someone else's theater, but onto her own stage. The aura surrounding her was both commanding and composed, an undeniable force that held the attention of everyone in the room. Silence spread like a wave, washing over the crowd. Conversations faltered mid-sentence. Even the orchestra seemed to pause, their instruments suspended in mid-note, as if sensing the gravity of her arrival. Guests shifted in their seats, whispering, pointing subtly, some unable to conceal their shock, others leaning in with curiosity, anticipating the drama that everyone could now sense was inevitable. At the center of the room, the husband froze. His confident stride faltered, his polished smile flickering into something fragile, unsure, as panic momentarily overtook his composure. Beside him, the mistress's expression shifted rapidly, confusion first, then unease, and finally, a subtle but unmistakable fear. The dominance she had assumed was suddenly under threat, her spotlight dimmed by the arrival of someone far more formidable than she had expected. The wife made no haste, no hurried steps, no desperate gestures. She moved calmly, deliberately, owning every glance, every second, every footstep, as though the entire room existed only for her to command. With each measured step forward, the invisible balance of power began to tip, shifting irrevocably toward the one who had quietly been underestimated all along. She moved through the room with the kind of calm authority that silenced murmurs even before she spoke. Guests instinctively straightened, glasses paused midway to their lips, and the orchestra seemed to play just a shade softer, as if the world itself had leaned in to witness what was unfolding. When she finally reached the center, standing directly before the couple whose confidence had dominated the evening, she paused for only a fraction of a second, letting the weight of her presence settle over the room. Then, with a composed nod, she greeted the guests nearby, her voice smooth, courteous, and utterly unshakable. "Good evening, everyone," she said, acknowledging the subtle glances of surprise and curiosity before turning her gaze to her husband. His eyes widened, a flash of recognition passing through the mask of charm he had worn all night. She acknowledged him calmly, without accusation, her words measured, her tone restrained. There was no hysteria, no tearful imploration, only the steady weight of truth meeting pretense. Then she turned to the woman who had, until moments ago, basked in admiration and assumed her place beside him. Her eyes were steady, assessing, and without a trace of hesitation, she began to speak. Her words were sharp, clear, and dignified, each syllable deliberate, cutting through the murmurs that had begun to rise again. "You were not unaware," she said, voice calm yet carrying an undeniable authority. "You knew he was married. You participated willingly, believing in a story that never belonged to you. Messages, promises, the private arrangements you considered ours to overlook, they all tell the truth you tried to deny." The mistress's initial shock was immediate, her face draining of color as comprehension dawned. Denial followed, fast and defensive, a desperate attempt to reclaim dignity, but it faltered under the weight of evidence laid bare before every guest. Humiliation settled over her, slow and crushing, as she realized the spotlight she had enjoyed was nothing more than borrowed light. She had been used, misled, and now everyone could see it. The husband moved instinctively, attempting to interrupt, to smooth over the rupture, to control the narrative he had so carefully curated. His charm failed him. The room no longer answered to him. But she did not pause. She refused to be silenced. Her words continued, clear, controlled, unwavering. She exposed the layers of deceit he had built, the duplicity that extended beyond their marriage into business, finances, and public appearances. Guests reacted instantly. Whispers surged through the crowd like electricity, some stepping away from the husband with subtle but unmistakable distancing, others leaning in, fascinated by her poise, admiring the strength and clarity she wielded effortlessly. The power in the room had shifted, the illusion of control shattered. Finally, with one last steady glance, she revealed what no one had expected, a legal document, a subtle but undeniable sign of authority over their shared assets, a move that completely redefined the power dynamic. The husband's confident posture faltered, the mistress's bravado evaporated, and the wife, poised and unyielding, the ripple from her revelation spread through the room and beyond with astonishing speed. Conversations that had moments ago celebrated charm and beauty now shifted to murmurs of astonishment and speculation. The knowledge that she controlled major shares in the husband's company was enough to tilt the scales of power immediately. Whispers of lawsuits quietly filed, of decisions already taken behind closed doors, began to circulate among the guests. Those who had once envied the couple's apparent dominance now reconsidered their positions, understanding that the balance of influence had changed overnight. The thought that she could expose not just infidelity, but the hidden cracks in his public reputation left many unsettled, realizing the depth of her reach. The husband, once untouchable in his composed elegance, now found himself faltering under the subtle but powerful scrutiny of those around him. Business partners who had shaken his hand with confidence just an hour earlier now exchanged uneasy glances, questioning loyalty, authority, and judgment. Investors whispered concerns, revisiting decisions they had assumed were secure. The room's energy, which had once celebrated his every move, now reflected doubt and apprehension. His authority, meticulously built and carefully performed, began to show cracks that could no longer be masked by charm or wealth. Meanwhile, the mistress slowly grasped the reality of her position. Every smile, every subtle attempt at control, every thought of triumph evaporated as she understood she had never truly been in power. The perceived victory, the admiration she had enjoyed, was revealed as an illusion crafted not by her skill, but by someone else's patience and intelligence. Her confidence faltered, replaced by shame and disbelief, the magnitude of her misjudgment settling heavily on her shoulders. Through it all, the wife remained composed, an unshakable presence amidst the chaos. No longer a silent observer, no longer a victim of deception, she stood as the undeniable force in the room. Justice, long delayed, now arrived not with anger or loud accusation, but with quiet, controlled authority. Every glance she cast reinforced her dominance, the collapse of pretense and lies laid bare before everyone, leaving no doubt about who truly held power. By the next morning, the gala was no longer just a private event. It had become the center of a storm spreading across social media and the news. Videos and photos of the wife's dramatic entrance circulated endlessly, each clip dissected and shared with commentary ranging from shock to admiration. Gossip columns thrived on the unfolding scandal, painting vivid accounts of the confrontation, the exposed secrets, and the stunned reactions of the elite attendees. Public scrutiny fell heavily on the husband, whose carefully curated image of charm and control crumbled under the weight of collective attention. Headlines blared his misdeeds and failures, analyzing every misstep, every lie, and every betrayal, leaving no corner of his personal and professional life untouched. His reputation suffered immediate damage. Business contacts questioned his integrity, partnerships wavered, and investors hesitated, fearing instability. Invitations to exclusive events dwindled, and whispers of distrust followed him wherever he went. Social circles that had once celebrated his influence now kept a cautious distance, leaving him isolated in the very world he had dominated for so long. The mistress, once confident and admired, disappeared from the public eye almost overnight. The fleeting thrill of status and attention evaporated, replaced by humiliation and regret as she realized she had been part of a narrative far bigger than herself, one she could neither control nor escape. In stark contrast, the wife emerged as a figure of undeniable strength and dignity. Praises poured in for her poise, intelligence, and composure, transforming her into a symbol of empowerment and resilience. Her presence reminded everyone how swiftly power could shift when truth, long concealed, was finally revealed. As the murmurs and whispers of the gala faded behind her, she walked with steady, unshakable purpose. Every step echoed the strength she had cultivated in silence, a strength born not from revenge, but from clarity and self-possession. She was not broken, nor did she need validation from anyone in the room. Instead, she reclaimed her identity, asserting a presence that no betrayal could diminish, no pretense could overshadow. She chose independence, refusing to allow anyone, husband or mistress, to define her life. She embraced self-respect, letting every action reflect the dignity she had always carried beneath the surface. And she looked toward a future entirely on her own terms, unbound by others' expectations, free to shape her path with deliberate intention. In that moment, she realized something profound. She hadn't simply reclaimed her place in the world, she had transformed it. She had redefined her worth, turning what had been a story of betrayal into a testament to power, poise, and unwavering self-respect.